My name is Hazel Whitcomb, and I am 48 years old. And 4 months ago, on a quiet Sunday afternoon in late June, I sat at my kitchen table across from my younger sister Adeline, who is 32 years old, and I watched her open a small padded envelope she had brought with her. And I watched her take out a single printed page from a consumer DNA service she had submitted her saliva to 3 weeks earlier on a whim. And I watched her read the page in silence for almost a minute. And I watched her look up at me. And I watched her face do the slow, careful thing a person's face does when an entire architecture of identity has just been rearranged in front of her in the space of 40 seconds. And she said, in a voice that was not quite steady, "Hazel, the service is telling me that you are not my older sister. The service is telling me that you are my mother. The probability is 99.8%. I would like you, please, to tell me whether that is true." I did not, in the moment that followed, say anything. I sat at the kitchen table in the small farmhouse outside Galena, Illinois, that I have owned for 12 years, and I looked at the face of the young woman I had loved as my sister since the morning she had been brought home from the hospital in the autumn of 1993, when I had been 16 years old and home from school for half a day because of a fever I had not actually had. And I tried to find, in the small, careful face across the table from me, the face of the 7-pound infant my own mother had taken from my arms in the maternity ward of St. Mercy Regional Hospital in the small hours of a Tuesday morning, and had not given back, and had walked out into the corridor with, and had returned to my hospital room with, 38 minutes later, with my own father beside her, and a small sheaf of paperwork in her hand, and the words, spoken in the steady, careful voice she had used my entire childhood for instructions she had already decided I was going to follow. "Hazel, sweetheart, you are 16 years old. You are still in high school. We have spoken to Dr. Hennessy. We have made the decision that is best for everyone. The baby is going to be your sister. You are going to forget any other version of this. Do you understand?" I did understand. I had understood, in fact, since the previous April, when I had told my mother I was pregnant, and my mother had told me, in the front seat of her station wagon in the parking lot of the small Methodist church we attended in our small town of Vance, Illinois, that I was not to say a single word about it to anybody at school, anybody at church, anybody in the family, and that she was going to handle it. She had handled it. She had pulled me out of the public high school in March of my sophomore year and enrolled me in a small online correspondence program operated out of a Christian college in southern Indiana. On the grounds, she told the neighbors and the church and my own grandmother on my father's side that I had been suffering from migraines that required a quieter learning environment. She had kept me in the house for the entire spring and summer and fall. She had told my father, who had not been involved in any of the original decision-making, what the decision was going to be on a Saturday morning in May while he was repairing a fence in the backyard. And my father, who had been a quiet, kind man for the entire 41 years of his marriage to my mother, and who had never, in those 41 years, contradicted her in front of me on a single matter of any importance, had not contradicted her on this one either. He had nodded. He had finished repairing the fence. He had not, that evening or any subsequent evening, raised the subject with me directly. He had loved me, I want to be clear. In the small, steady, wordless way, he loved everyone in his life. And he had also, in this particular matter, simply allowed my mother to decide. The way he had allowed my mother to decide whether the new kitchen tile would be cream-colored or white in 1988, and whether we would attend the 8:30 service or the 11 o'clock service at the Methodist Church on any given Sunday morning for 30 years. Before I take you further into any of this, I want to ask you to tap the like button below and to subscribe to this channel if you have not yet, because stories like the one I am telling you tonight only travel as far as you carry them. Leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from, because I am genuinely going to read them, and the geography of where these accounts end up never stops surprising me. Now let me take you back to a small farming town in the western part of Illinois in the early 1990s, and to the 16-year-old girl I was on the night the worst and best thing that ever happened to me happened in the same hospital room within 38 minutes. And to the 32 years of small, careful, daily silence that followed it. And to the consumer DNA service that, finally, in the space of a single printed page on a Sunday afternoon, undid an architecture my mother had spent the last 3 decades of her life believing she had built to last forever. I want to tell you about the town I grew up in, because the town is what made the whole arrangement possible, and the town is what made my mother believe it would hold. Vance, Illinois, in 1993, had a population of just over 1,200 people. It had 1 Methodist church and 1 Lutheran church and 1 small Catholic mission. And it had 1 combined elementary and middle school and 1 regional high school that the children from 3 surrounding farming townships also attended. It had 1 diner on the main street run by a woman named Eunice who had attended the same Methodist church my family attended, and 1 small grocery store run by a man named Roy who had been in my father's high school graduating class in 1968, and 1 feed store run by a man named Walter who was my mother's second cousin. There was no part of life in Vance, Illinois in the early 1990s that was not visible to someone who had known you since you were small. My mother, Margaret Whitcomb, born Margaret Peterson, had grown up in a farmhouse 7 miles outside Vance, had married my father, Theodore Whitcomb, in the same Methodist church we attended in 1972, had borne me in 1977 when she was 26, and had spent the entire 53 years of her life in that small, steady, visible world. She was the chairwoman of the Methodist Women's Society. She was the volunteer coordinator for the regional food pantry. She was, in the small, careful way the propertied women of small Midwestern towns are queens, a queen of Vance, Illinois. She had been raised by her own mother to understand that a woman's first and last and most important responsibility was the public reputation of her household. And she had inherited that understanding without ever once subjecting it to examination. And she had transmitted it, very deliberately, to me, although I had subjected it to a great deal of private examination by the time I was 16, and had simply learned not to say anything about it out loud. The boy who got me pregnant was named Coleman Reed, and he was a high school senior at the regional high school when I was a sophomore, 2 years older than me, and he was the older brother of a girl in my own grade named Marjorie Reed, and he had taken me to the homecoming dance in October of 1992 as a favor to Marjorie, who had wanted me invited because we had been friends since 4th grade, and he had taken me home afterward in his father's truck, and we had parked the truck at the end of a long dirt road on the far edge of his father's farm. And a great many things had happened in that truck across the next 2 months that I am not going to describe to you here. Not because the details are particularly dramatic, but because they are private, and were private even at the time. And Coleman Reed was not, in the end, the person I want you to be thinking about across the rest of this account. He was a perfectly ordinary, kind boy who, on the single occasion across 2 months when I told him I had missed 2 periods in a row, looked at me in the dim cab of his father's truck and said, very quietly, "Hazel, I am so sorry. I am going to leave for Iowa State in August. I am going to do the right thing if you tell me to. But I am asking you to please not tell me to. Because if you do, my whole life is going to end at 18. And your whole life is going to end at 16. And we are not going to be good for the baby or for each other." I had said, "Coleman, I am not going to tell you to do anything. Go to Iowa State. I am going to handle it." He had cried. I had not cried. He had driven me home. He had gone to Iowa State in August of 1993. He had not, in the 32 years since, attempted to contact me. He had, I learned only last spring through a mutual high school acquaintance, become a veterinarian in Cedar Rapids, married a woman from Iowa City in 2002, fathered 3 children who are now grown, and lived a perfectly ordinary, kind life. And he had not, as far as I knew or have any reason to suspect, ever known what had become of the pregnancy or of the child it had produced. I am not angry with Coleman Reed. I have never been angry with Coleman Reed. He had been an 18-year-old boy in a small farming town with a scholarship he was about to lose, and he had told me the truth about the limits of his own courage. And I had decided, at 16, that this was not a man I wanted to construct any future on. And the decision had been mine, and I do not regret it. I have nothing further to say about Coleman Reed in this account. What I have a great deal to say about, and what I have spent the 4 months since that Sunday afternoon in my kitchen, turning over in my own slow, careful way, is my mother. Because my mother, when I told her in early April of 1993 that I was pregnant, did not weep, did not rage, did not even, in the immediate sense, react. She sat in the front seat of her station wagon in the parking lot of the Methodist church, where she had picked me up after a small youth group event I had been attending in the basement, and she put both hands on the steering wheel, and she looked straight ahead through the windshield at the brick side of the church, and she said, after almost a full minute of silence, "All right, Hazel, we are going to handle this. You are not going to say anything to anybody. You are going to come out of school. You are going to do your 10th grade by correspondence. You are going to give birth in the fall, and then the baby is going to be your sister, because I am going to be the one who registers the birth, and your father and I are going to be the ones whose names go on the certificate, and the entire town is going to be told that I am pregnant, and the entire town is going to believe it, because the entire town has been told that I am pregnant a number of times across the last 15 years, and has been told each time, very sadly, that we lost it. And this one, we are not going to lose. Do you understand me?" I had not understood her. I had been 16. I had said, in a small voice I do not remember the exact pitch of, "Mama, people will know." And my mother had said, in the same calm voice she had used to tell me what kind of cake she was baking for the church bake sale, "No, Hazel, they will not, because I am going to make sure they do not. And you are going to help me make sure they do not. And in 5 years, when you are 21, and you are out of college, and you are at the start of your own life, you are going to thank me for what I did for you tonight, even though I do not expect you to understand it now." I had not, in the 32 years since, thanked her for what she did for me that night. She had also not, in the same 32 years, raised the subject again with me directly, because she had decided, when she walked out of my hospital room 38 minutes after I had given birth, with my own father beside her and the paperwork in her hand, and the small, careful baby in the white hospital blanket pressed against the front of her cardigan, that the matter had been resolved, and that further discussion would only weaken the resolution, and that strong women did not discuss the things they had resolved. I want to walk you through the practical mechanics of how she had done it, because the mechanics are important, and the mechanics are how I have understood, in the 4 months since the DNA service, the full scope of what I had been complicit in, without knowing I was being complicit in it. In March of 1993, when I was just past my 16th birthday and about 2 months pregnant by the boy in the truck, my mother withdrew me from Vance Regional High School. She told the principal, a man named Dr. Albert Friesen, who had been a deacon at the Methodist Church alongside my mother for 15 years and who had no reason to disbelieve her, that I had been suffering from a worsening pattern of migraines that the family physician had recommended a quieter educational environment for. The family physician, a man named Dr. Roland Hennessy, was my mother's first cousin, the son of her mother's only sister, a man who had been the only doctor in Vance, Illinois for 31 years, and who had delivered me in the same St. Mercy Regional Hospital 16 years earlier, in which he was about to deliver the next child of the Whitcomb family. He was the man, my mother told me on the same evening in the station wagon, who was going to handle the medical side of the arrangement. He was, she said, a man who could be trusted. He was, she said, family. I did not, at 16, understand the full weight of the word family in the way my mother had used it that night. I understand it now. My mother had used the word family the way mothers in small towns have used that word for 2 centuries, which is to mean a small, closed circle of people who will protect a household's public reputation against the truth, and who will execute the small, careful frauds required to maintain the protection, and who will, in exchange for being included in the circle, never speak about what they have done, either to each other or to anyone outside the circle, even after the people the protection was extended to are dead. Dr. Hennessy did not deliver the baby. He could not, my mother had decided very early in the planning, deliver the baby, because his presence on the birth certificate would, in the small, careful records-keeping habits of rural Illinois in 1993, have created a paper trail that linked the delivery too closely to our household. The delivery itself was done at St. Mercy Regional Hospital, 80 miles from Vance, by an obstetrician on the staff of the hospital who had no connection to our family, a Dr. Marlowe Pham, who had been on overnight call the Tuesday morning Adeline was born. Dr. Hennessy had, instead, played a different role. He had been the family physician of record for my mother across the entire spring and summer and fall of 1993. He had been the one who had signed the small confidential note placed in the file at St. Mercy Regional Hospital, indicating that the patient, Margaret Whitcomb, who was presenting in the labor and delivery ward at 3 a.m. on the second Tuesday of October, was, in fact, the registered prenatal patient whose chart Dr. Hennessy had been managing for the previous 7 months, and who had, despite earlier obstetric difficulties, carried this pregnancy successfully to term. The chart he had been managing was not, of course, my mother's chart. The chart he had been managing was mine. He had been seeing me in his small office on the second floor of a converted Victorian house on the edge of Vance, every 2 weeks throughout the spring and summer, under my mother's name. He had been recording my own height and weight and blood pressure under my mother's name. He had been having me change into the paper gown in the small examination room in the back, and he had been performing the routine prenatal examinations, and he had been signing the resulting paperwork with my mother's name in the patient field, and my mother's date of birth, and my mother's social security number. He was a careful man. He was also a man who, by 1993, had been complicit in at least 2 other arrangements of approximately the same shape inside Vance, Illinois, although I would not learn about those other arrangements until much later, when one of his former patients, an elderly woman named Patience Olafson, would tell me about her own niece in the autumn of 1971. The arrangement was, in 1993, a kind of small, old-fashioned, rural Methodist habit. Dr. Hennessy had simply been the man in the town who knew how to execute it. My mother accompanied me to every single one of Dr. Hennessy's appointments. She drove me there in the station wagon. She sat in the examination room with me. She answered questions when nurses came in by reaching across the table and putting her hand on my arm and saying, in her calm churchwoman's voice, "Hazel is helping me with my appointments because I get nervous about the blood work." Nobody ever questioned this. The nurses at Dr. Hennessy's office were 2 women from the church, both of whom had known my mother since she was a girl, and neither of whom had any reason on earth to wonder what they were looking at when the chairwoman of the Methodist Women's Society brought her 16-year-old daughter to her prenatal appointments. They simply assumed, the way people in small towns assume things, that the chairwoman of the Methodist Women's Society would not be doing anything that required explanation, and that if there was any explanation required, it would be provided in due course, and that if it was not provided in due course, it was none of their business. On the second Tuesday of October of 1993, at approximately 10 in the evening, I began to have contractions in the small downstairs bedroom of my parents' farmhouse. The bedroom my mother had moved me into in the spring, on the theory that I should not be climbing the stairs in my condition. My mother drove me herself in the station wagon, the 80 miles north and east to St. Mercy Regional Hospital, where she had registered 2 weeks earlier under her own name for a planned induction that had not actually been scheduled, but that the registration department of the hospital had no specific way of cross-checking against the actual obstetric records. We arrived at St. Mercy at 1 a.m. My mother checked us in. The admitting clerk asked who the patient was. My mother said, "I am." The admitting clerk asked who I was. My mother said, "She is my niece. She is going to be in the labor room with me. My husband is on his way." The admitting clerk, who was very tired and who had no reason on earth to question the calm, warm voice of an obvious churchwoman at 1 a.m. on a slow Tuesday, did not question it. She processed the admission under my mother's name. She did not, at any point in the next 20 minutes, ask me a single question. The labor and delivery nurses, when we got to the room, were busy with 2 other deliveries on the floor that night, and they did not have time to look at any of us very carefully. And the obstetrician on duty, Dr. Pham, came in only twice during the 4 hours of active labor and was, on both visits, focused on the labor itself and not on the surrounding family configuration. My mother stood beside the bed for the entire 4 hours. She held my hand. She did not, I want to be clear, behave unkindly to me during those 4 hours. She told me several times that I was doing well, and she wiped my forehead with a cool cloth, and she gave me ice chips, and she said, at one point, very quietly, "Hazel, I am proud of you for being so brave. We are almost through." I had not heard her tell me she was proud of me in approximately 4 years before that night, and I would not hear her tell me she was proud of me again at any point in the 31 years before her death of a stroke in 2024. The night of my labor was, in a strange way I have only recently been able to look at directly, the closest she and I ever were to each other in my entire life. She had decided that I was the project she was managing that night, and she had managed me with a particular tender competence she managed all of her projects. And the tenderness had been, in its careful, narrow way, real. I do not want you to think it was not real. It was real, and it was also a thing being deployed in the service of an arrangement that was about to take from me the only daughter I would ever have and tell me she was my sister. The baby was born at 3:41 in the morning. I held her for approximately 22 minutes. I had timed it on the small wall clock above the door because I had decided sometime in the previous hour that I was going to time it. I had understood, in some part of me by then, that I was going to be allowed to hold her for a finite window, and that the window was going to be the only window I would ever have. She had a small head of dark hair. She had blue eyes, the way newborns have blue eyes for the first weeks of their lives. And she had my own mother's particular small chin, and my own grandmother's narrow shoulders, and Coleman Reed's pale skin. And she looked at me, in the 22 minutes I held her, with the slow, careful gaze of a newborn, taking the long measure of the room she had just arrived in. And I said her name out loud to her. Her name, in that 22-minute window, was Iris Susanna Whitcomb. I had chosen it in the long, quiet months of the summer when I had been kept inside the house in Vance. Iris was for my grandmother on my father's side, who had loved me without footnotes since I was small. Susanna was for an older friend at the Methodist Church who had been kind to me in a particular, silent, watchful way during the months of my pregnancy that no other adult in the town had been kind to me in. The name had been mine. I had not, until that 22-minute window in the hospital room, said the name out loud to anybody. I said it to her 4 times in those 22 minutes, very quietly, with my face beside her face. I said, "Hello, Iris. Hello, sweetheart. Hello, Iris Susanna. Hello." She did not, of course, respond. She breathed against the side of my face. She closed her eyes. She opened them. She closed them. My mother came into the room at 4:03 in the morning with my father beside her and the paperwork in her hand. My father had driven up from Vance overnight. He had not, until that moment in the doorway of the hospital room, made eye contact with me about any aspect of what was happening. And he did not make eye contact with me now. He looked at the baby in my arms. He looked at his shoes. He looked at my mother's shoulder. My mother walked over to the bed. She did not, at first, reach for the baby. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked at me. She said, "Hazel, sweetheart, we are going to do what we said. The paperwork is ready. The hospital records are going to show that I delivered her tonight. Your father is going to be on the certificate. She is going to come home with us as our daughter. You are going to come home with us as her older sister, the way you have always been our older daughter. We are going to give her a name we have already decided on. We are going to call her Adeline. We are not going to discuss this again. Not tonight, not at home, not at any point in the next 40 years. Because the only way this works is if we never discuss it. I am going to take her now. I want you to give her to me. I want you to do it without making a sound, because there are nurses in the corridor and a wall is not soundproof. Do you understand me?" I had understood her. I had handed Adeline to her. I had not made a sound. I had watched my mother carry the baby I had named Iris Susanna out of the hospital room and down the corridor, and I had heard her voice brightening, addressing a nurse in the hallway. "We are doing so well. The baby has finally fallen asleep. My niece has been such a help." I had listened to the voice recede. I had lain on my back in the hospital bed at 4:11 in the morning on the second Tuesday of October in 1993, and I had stared at the small wall clock above the door, and I had not cried. I would not cry properly about Iris Susanna for almost a decade. I would not cry about her in any sustained way until I was 26 and had finally moved out of Vance, Illinois, and was lying on the bathroom floor of a small studio apartment in Bloomington at 2 in the morning on the night of what would have been her 9th birthday. And the entire long-held-back interior weather of 9 years had finally arrived all at once. And I had cried into a folded towel for approximately 2 hours, and I had then gotten up and washed my face and gone to bed. I want to tell you about the next 32 years, because the next 32 years are the floor on top of which the Sunday afternoon at my kitchen table sits. I came home from the hospital 3 days after Adeline was born. My mother had told everyone in Vance that the delivery had been difficult, that she had hemorrhaged, that the baby had been large, that she had needed several extra days of recovery. The town had accepted this. Casseroles arrived. 2 of my mother's friends from the Methodist Women's Society organized a small meal train. My father returned to his work at the small grain elevator he had managed for 26 years. My mother, who had not, in fact, given birth and was therefore not, in fact, recovering, performed the recovery with the same competent attention she had performed the pregnancy, lying on the couch in the front parlor, receiving the visitors who came to admire the new baby, and accepting their casseroles with the careful, warm smile of a chairwoman who had finally, after 2 decades of trying, been given a second daughter. I was, in these first weeks, the older sister. I was not allowed to feed the baby. I was not allowed to bathe her. I was not. My mother told me on the 3rd afternoon after we had brought her home to hold her in front of any visitor because, my mother said, the bond a mother forms with a newborn in the first 8 weeks is a delicate thing, and we were not going to confuse her about who her mother was. I was 16. I did what I was told. I held Iris, who was now Adeline, only in the small private hours when nobody else was looking, in her crib in my mother's bedroom, with my fingertip resting on the back of her small fist while she slept. And I whispered her original name to her, very quietly, in the dark. "Hello, Iris Susanna." For many months. until at some point in the spring of the following year, I had stopped being able to whisper it without crying, and I had stopped saying it. And within a year, I had stopped, in any conscious moment, even thinking it. I returned to public school in Vance Regional High School in January of 1994, my mother having told the school principal that the migraines had resolved. Nobody at school asked me where I had been. Nobody at school asked me about the new baby. The town of Vance had absorbed the official stories so completely by the time I returned that the actual events of the previous 9 months had become, in the public memory of my entire community, a thing that had not happened. Margaret Whitcomb had, at the age of 42, against very long odds, given birth to a second daughter. The previous daughter, Hazel, had taken some time off school for migraines. Both daughters were now thriving. There was nothing further to discuss. I finished high school. I went to a small state university in central Illinois on an academic scholarship I had earned in part because I had spent 18 months of my adolescence with nothing to do but read. I majored in English literature. I became, eventually, a high school English teacher. I taught for 9 years in suburban Chicago, and for the last 12 years I have been teaching at a regional high school just outside Galena, in the far northwestern corner of Illinois. I live alone in a small farmhouse on 3 acres outside the town, with 2 cats and a small kitchen garden. I have not married. I have not, in any sustained way, dated. I want to be careful about that part, because I do not want to make my unmarried life sound like a small, private monument to what happened to me at 16. It is not quite that. I have had 2 long relationships in my 30s, one of which ended kindly, and one of which ended less kindly. And I have had a small, steady circle of friends across my adult life, and I have not been lonely, exactly. I have been, instead, a woman who has carried, since she was 16, a single, very large piece of private information about her own biography that she has not been able to share with any of the people she has been close to in the years since, because sharing it would have required her to first admit it to herself. And admitting it to herself, for the better part of 30 years, was a thing she did not have the emotional architecture to do without losing the only family she had. My mother died in February of 2024, 14 months ago, of a stroke, very quickly, in the kitchen of the farmhouse in Vance, where she had lived her entire adult life. My father had died 4 years earlier of complications from pneumonia, in the same farmhouse, in the same way he had lived, which was quietly and in the next room. After my mother's funeral, my younger sister Adeline, who was then 31, had inherited the farmhouse and a small portfolio of certificates of deposit my parents had built across 40 years, and she had asked me, at the small reception after the funeral, whether I minded. I had told her I did not mind. The farmhouse had been the place my mother had taken the baby I named Iris and renamed Adeline, and had kept her. And the farmhouse was not a place I had any desire to inherit. Adeline had been kind to me on the day of the funeral. She had been kind to me at every other funeral I had been to with her, including our father's 4 years earlier. She had been, in the simple terms of the surface of our lives, a wonderful younger sister to me across the entire 31 years of her life. She had visited me at the small farmhouse in Galena perhaps 4 times a year. She had brought me a small ceramic mug she had thrown herself in the pottery class she had taken in college for my 40th birthday. She had cried, openly, in my kitchen, at 30, when she had ended her engagement to a man named Bryce, who had turned out to be unsuitable in ways she had taken too long to see. And she had let me make her tea, and let me hold her, and let me say to her, the way I had said to her thousands of times across her life, "Adi, sweetheart, it is all right. You are going to be all right." She had been, in every way that I had been able to give myself permission to perceive, the great love of my life. I had loved her the way I loved her, by understanding her to be my younger sister.
I had not allowed myself at any point across the 31 years to permit any other configuration of love to surface in my own chest, because permitting it would have required me to permit the entire interior continent of what had been taken from me to surface at the same time. And I was not, until very recently, ready for that to happen. The DNA service was Adeline's idea. She had ordered the saliva kit on a small whim in the early spring of this year, several months after our mother's death, because, she had told me on the phone the day she had ordered it, she had been feeling, since the funeral, a kind of slow, careful curiosity about our family's deeper background. The kind of curiosity that arrives when both of your parents are dead, and there is no longer anyone living to ask the routine genealogical questions that newly orphaned adults tend to want answers to. She had not, in ordering the kit, been looking for anything specific. She had been looking for, she told me, the boring kind of confirmation that we are mostly Norwegian and Swedish and German on mom's side, and mostly Scotch-Irish on dad's side, the way we have always been told. She had submitted her saliva in May. She had received the printed results in late June. The Sunday afternoon she came to my kitchen, 3 days after the printed envelope arrived in her mailbox in Madison, Wisconsin, where she had lived for the last 6 years and worked as a graphic designer, was the first time we had been able to schedule a face-to-face Sunday in almost 2 months. She had not, on the phone the previous Thursday when we had confirmed the visit, told me there was anything in particular she wanted to discuss. She had told me she wanted to bring me a small bag of beans from a roaster she had recently discovered in Madison, and to sit on my back porch and look at the way I had finally finished restaining the railing. She had brought the beans. The beans were good. We had drunk 2 cups of the coffee from them at my kitchen table. She had then, almost as an afterthought, the way she has been doing things her entire life when the things matter most, said, "Hazel, I want to show you something I have been carrying around in my purse for 3 days, because I do not know what to do with it, and I do not trust myself to know what it means. And you have always been the person I bring difficult paperwork to. I would like, please, for us to look at it together." I had said yes. She had taken the small padded envelope out of her bag. She had taken out the printed page. She had read it twice, in silence. She had looked up at me. She had said the sentence I told you about at the beginning of this account. And I had not, in the moment that followed, said anything. I want to walk you through the next 60 seconds, because the next 60 seconds are the part of this account I have been most uncertain about how to tell. They are the 60 seconds during which I made the decision that has determined every other decision I have made in the 4 months since. And they are the 60 seconds I have, in the 4 months since, been most grateful for and most relieved by. I could have lied to her. I could have said, "Adeline, there must be some kind of mistake with the test. We must have gotten our samples mixed up." She would have, I think, very nearly believed me, because the only reference point either of us had for what kinds of mistakes a consumer DNA service is capable of was the bright, reassuring marketing copy on the website of the service itself. I could have told her I needed to think about it. I could have told her that there had been a complicated situation in the family that I was not yet ready to discuss. I could have asked her not to tell me yet what the report had said in detail and to give me a week. There were several roads in those 60 seconds I might have taken. I want you to know I considered all of them. I considered them in a fast, careful, internal way, the way I considered the available exits when I had walked into the hospital room 32 years earlier as a 16-year-old in active labor and had counted the chairs in the corner and the location of the small bedside table and the height of the window above the parking lot. The way I have considered the available exits in any room I have walked into for the entire 32 years since. I considered all the roads, and then I rejected all of them. I want to tell you why I rejected them. I rejected them because at the moment I had been sitting at my kitchen table, looking across at the face of the 32-year-old woman I had spent her entire life loving as my younger sister. I had been looking at a face that, in the small, late spring light coming through my kitchen window, was unmistakably the face of the 7-pound infant
I had named Iris Susanna Whitcomb at 3:41 on the second Tuesday of October in 1993. The face had been there the whole time, for 32 years. I had simply, the entire 32 years, refused to permit my own eyes to see it. The DNA service had not told me anything I had not already known. The DNA service had only made it impossible for me to continue not knowing it. And the woman across the table from me deserved, after 32 years of being lied to about the entire architecture of her own biography by a chairwoman of a Methodist Women's Society who had died 14 months earlier without bothering to leave a single sentence of confession behind, to be told the truth by the only living person in the world who was in a position to tell it to her. I said, "Adeline, sweetheart, the service is correct. I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to need you to let me tell it to you in order, because the order is going to matter. I would like, if it is all right with you, to start with the spring of 1993. I'm going to make us another pot of coffee first." I had made the coffee. I had brought the small jar of cream from the refrigerator and the small dish of sugar from the cabinet beside the stove. And I had sat back down at the kitchen table, and I had told her, across the next 3 hours and 20 minutes, the entirety of what I have told you tonight in the account so far. I had told it without softening anything. I had told it without protecting our mother. I had told it without protecting myself. I had told her about Coleman Reed in 2 sentences, with the small note that he had not known and did not know, and that she could choose, in the months that followed, whether she wanted to look for him. I had told her about my mother in the station wagon in the parking lot of the Methodist Church. I had told her about Dr. Hennessy and the false prenatal records. I had told her about my own father's silence. I had told her about the 22 minutes I had held her in the hospital room, the original name, Iris Susanna, the small wall clock above the door, the small late spring light in which I was, at that very moment, looking at her 32 years later in my own kitchen. She listened. She did not interrupt me once. She drank her coffee. She let her face do whatever her face needed to do, which was a slow, careful series of reorganizations that I am not going to try to describe to you here because they were hers, and they were not my reorganizations to summarize. And there are some pieces of a person's private grief that are not material for an account. She cried, twice, very quietly. I cried, twice, at different moments. When I had finished, when I had told her every part of the story I had to tell, she sat in the kitchen with me in the long, careful silence that followed. After perhaps 8 minutes, she said, "Hazel, I want to ask you a question. May I ask it?" I said, "Yes, Adie. You can ask me anything." She said, "Iris Susanna, the name you gave me. Did Mom know you had named me?" I had not, until that question, thought about this in 32 years. I sat with it for almost a minute. I said, "Adeline, I think she did not. I do not think I told her. I do not think she ever asked. I do not think she would have considered it her business on the terms she had set." Adeline nodded. She said, "All right. Then it is mine to know, and it is mine to keep. Thank you for giving it to me." She did not, in that sentence, or any subsequent sentence, ask me what I wanted to be called by her now. I noticed that. I have noticed it, more carefully, in the 4 months since. She had not, in the immediate aftermath of the revelation, leapt to recategorize me. She had sat with the new information for a long time. In the slow, careful way she has handled all serious information her entire adult life. She had said, near the end of that first afternoon, before she got back in her car to drive home to Madison, "Hazel, I am not going to call you anything different yet. I am not yet sure what we are to each other. I would like, if it is all right with you, to spend some time with the new information and not be in a hurry to give either of us a name we have not yet earned. Is that okay? I had said, 80. Yes, that is the right way to do this. We have time. There is no rush. She had hugged me, briefly. She had gotten in her car. She had driven back to Madison in the long evening light. I want to tell you what happened in the 4 months that followed, because the 4 months are the part of this account I think most about. For the first 6 weeks after that Sunday, Adeline and I did not see each other in person. We had agreed at the end of the kitchen conversation that she needed time to live alongside the new information privately, and that I needed to give her that time without crowding her. We had agreed that we would talk on the phone, but not every day. We talked, in fact, perhaps every 5 or 6 days. She would call me. She had questions. The questions arrived in no particular order. She had a question in our second phone call about my own grandmother, the one I had named her for in part, who had died when she was 4, and whom she had no clear memory of, but who she now wanted to understand was her great-grandmother and not her grandmother. She had a question in our fourth phone call about whether I thought Coleman Reed would have, if the conversation in the truck had gone differently, ever been her father in any of the senses that mattered. I had told her, very carefully, that I did not know, that I had been 16 and had not been in a position to evaluate him as a future father, but that the limited evidence I had suggested he had become, in his actual life, a kind, ordinary man who had loved his actual 3 children and had not, as far as I could tell, ever attempted to look behind himself for a 4th. She had taken that information without comment. She had asked, in our 6th phone call, whether I wanted to be told anything more about her own emotional process across the 6 weeks. I had told her, gently, that I did not need to be told anything she did not need to tell, and that what I had been doing on my end of the phone for 6 weeks was waiting, and that the waiting was not a hardship, and that she should take whatever time the question itself was taking. She had told me, in that same call, that I was being uncharacteristically generous with the pacing, and that she had noticed. I had told her, Adeline, I have had 32 years of practice. She had laughed briefly on the phone. The laugh had been the first laugh of any kind we had shared since the kitchen. In early August, she drove down to Galena and stayed at the farmhouse for a long weekend. We did not, across the entire weekend, discuss the central topic directly. We weeded the small garden. We drove into town for the Saturday farmers market. We sat on the back porch in the late evening light, and we ate ice cream out of the carton with 2 spoons, the way we had been eating ice cream out of cartons together since she was 4. On the Sunday morning, over coffee at the kitchen table, she said to me very quietly, Hazel, I want to tell you something I have decided. I am not going to start calling you Mom. I want you to know that. I am also not going to keep calling you my sister. I am going to call you Hazel, because Hazel is, in the end, the thing you have always been to me, and the thing I now understand is the most accurate name for what you have always been to me. The person who was performing the role of my mother for 32 years is dead, and what she was performing was not, on examination, motherhood. It was something else, and I am not yet ready to give it a clean word. The person who was actually being my mother for the first 22 minutes of my life is sitting across the table from me drinking coffee, and what she has done for me in the 32 years since the first 22 minutes has not been called motherhood and has not looked like motherhood, but has, in some private backdoor way I am only just now starting to be able to perceive, been a kind of patient, long-distance love that I had been receiving the whole time without knowing what to call it. I am going to call you Hazel. I am going to come down to Galena most months. I am going to call you on the phone the way I have always called you. I am going to bring you coffee from the roaster in Madison the way I have always brought you coffee from the roaster in Madison. the form of our relationship is not, I think, going to change very much. The internal contents of it are going to keep on slowly changing for a long time, and I do not want to be in a hurry about the internal contents, because if the form holds, the internal contents can take their time. Is that all right with you? I had said, 80. Yes, that is exactly right. Thank you for thinking it through that carefully. She had nodded. She had buttered a second piece of toast. I want to skip forward because the 4 months have been long, and I do not want to walk you through every conversation. I want to tell you instead 3 more things that have happened, because they are the things I think will matter to anyone listening to this account. The first is that we drove together in early September to St. Mercy Regional Hospital in northern Illinois, 80 miles from the small town of Vance. We did not go to the hospital itself. We went to the small public memorial garden behind the hospital, where I had walked alone 3 times in my 20s, in the years when I had been unable to think about any of this directly, but had been compelled to keep coming back to the building anyway. The garden contains a small bench and a small ornamental cherry tree, and a plaque that lists the names of donors who funded its construction in 1978. Adeline and I sat on the bench. We did not say anything for almost 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, she said, "Hazel, I want to do a thing. I want to ask you a question first. Would you mind if I introduced you, when I introduce you to people from now on, as my older sister? In public, in the ordinary way I have introduced you my entire life, even though that is not the most accurate word." I had said, 80, no, I would not mind. I have been your older sister your entire life. The word is true enough to keep using. The other word is true enough to know we are not using. You can use whichever word the room you are in calls for. I trust you with the choice. She had nodded. She had said, "All right, thank you." The other thing I wanted to do is this. She had taken out of her purse a small piece of paper she had folded twice. She had unfolded it. She had handed it to me. On the paper, in her own handwriting, she had written the words, Iris Susanna Whitcomb, and underneath them, the date of birth I had given her in the hospital, 32 years earlier. And underneath the date, a single short sentence. The sentence said, "This is the original name of the person who has, since then, been called Adeline Margaret Whitcomb. The original name is also true. The person it belonged to has chosen to keep both names. Hazel. Thank you for giving me both." I had held the piece of paper for a long time. I had folded it carefully. I had put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. I have it, now, in a small frame on the kitchen windowsill of the farmhouse outside Galena. The second thing is that we have, slowly and with the help of a small estates attorney in Galena, begun the legal process of correcting the public record. The attorney, a woman in her 60s named Rosamond Halpern, who has been doing this kind of work for 31 years and who took our case with a small, careful warmth she did not waste any sentences explaining, has filed the petitions with the appropriate state offices in Illinois to issue a corrected birth certificate listing me as the biological mother of Adeline Margaret Whitcomb, and to record, in a small private filing in the appropriate court in our home county, the full, true sequence of events as I have laid them out in this account, so that the record will exist, in writing, in a place where nobody can ever take it back. Adeline and I did not need the corrected birth certificate for any practical purpose. We did not need the small private court filing either. We chose both of them for the same reason. Because the small Methodist chairwoman who had spent her life believing she had built an arrangement that would hold forever, had built it under the assumption that nobody would ever do the small, careful paperwork required to dismantle it. And we are, both of us, in our different, careful ways, the kind of women who do paperwork. The corrected certificate arrived in the mail on a Tuesday in late September. Adeline drove down to Galena that evening, and we looked at it together at the kitchen table, in the same chairs we had been sitting in when she had read the DNA report to me 3 months earlier. and she had said, quietly, "Hazel, there it is, in ink." I had said, "There it is, 80. We had put the certificate in a folder. We had eaten ice cream. We had not said anything else about it that night. The third thing is that I went in the middle of August, alone, to the cemetery in Vance, Illinois, where my mother is buried beside my father in the small Methodist plot the family has maintained for 4 generations. I had not been back to the grave since the day of her funeral. I had not been planning to go back. I had wanted, for the better part of 14 months, to leave her where she was, in the small, careful afterlife reputation she had spent her entire life building, and to not return to her in any form. But after the conversation with Adeline on the back porch in early August, after the decision Adeline had made about what to call me, I had understood that there was one more thing I needed to do, and that I needed to do it alone, and that I needed to do it without telling Adeline I was doing it. Because the thing I was about to do was for me, and not for her. I drove the 3 hours from Galena to Vance on a Saturday morning in mid-August. I parked at the edge of the small cemetery. I walked across the wet grass to the family plot. The stones are simple, in the way Methodist farming families do stones, with the names and the dates and a single small line of scripture each. My mother's stone says, under her name and her dates, "She did what she thought was best." I had not chosen those words. My mother had chosen them herself, in her will, with the careful, long-prepared self-presentation of a woman who had organized every other moment of her public life. I stood in front of the stone for a long time. I did not put flowers on it. I had not brought any. I stood there in the late summer light, with the cicadas loud in the trees at the edge of the cemetery, and I said, out loud, in the small, clear voice I have learned to use in the 4 months since the DNA report, when I want to be sure a sentence is being said the way I mean it. "Mama, I want you to know that I have told her. I want you to know that I have told her everything. I want you to know that I did not protect you. I want you to know that the paperwork has been filed and that the correction is now in writing in a place where you cannot reach it. I want you to know that Adeline is now my daughter on the certificate the state of Illinois keeps. I want you to know that she has kept both names. I want you to know that she does not call me Mom. I want you to know that this is the right answer and not a failure. I want you to know that the two of us have decided to take our time and that we are not in a hurry, and that we are going to have whatever time we have left, and that the time is going to be ours and not yours. I want you to know one more thing. I forgive you nothing. I do not need to. I have her. You have a line of scripture you wrote yourself." I stood at the stone for another minute. I walked back to the car. I drove back to Galena. I have not been back since. I do not expect to go back. I want to tell you what I have learned, although I am only 48 years old. And the lesson is, if I am honest, the lesson of one specific kind of family in one specific kind of small town. And I am cautious about pretending it generalizes. What I have learned is that the most expensive lies are the lies you participate in as a child because you were given no other choice, and because the adults around you knew you were not yet capable of refusing. The most expensive lies are not the ones you tell. The most expensive lies are the ones that get told around you, in soft Midwestern voices, in church parking lots and in front parlors, and in the corridors of regional hospitals, by women in sensible cardigans who have decided what the truth of your life is going to be on your behalf, and to execute the decision with the patient competence of women who run church bake sales. The lies are durable, because the lies are not, in the technical sense, lies told to you. The lies are arrangements imposed on you before you knew what the word for them was. You absorb them the way a child absorbs the language of the household she is born into, and by the time you are old enough to evaluate them, the language has already become the only language you have, and dismantling it would require dismantling the entire interior architecture of your relationship with your own family. And the people who built the architecture have counted on the fact that you will not be able to dismantle it inside the lifetime of the people who built it. They have, in many cases, been correct. They are correct as long as you continue to permit them to be correct.
They stop being correct on the afternoon a younger sister, who is in fact a daughter, who is in fact a great, quiet, beloved person across the entire field of your adult life, walks into your kitchen with a printed page from a service that did not exist when the lie was first arranged, and reads you a number that nobody in the cardigan generation could have foreseen, and asks you to please tell her whether the number is true. On that afternoon, you have a single decision to make. And the decision is not whether to tell her, because she has already, in some part of her, been told by the page. The decision is whether you are going to spend the next 32 years being the second adult in her life who failed to tell her the truth when she asked you for it. I made my decision in approximately 60 seconds. I do not regret it. I am not going to regret it. I would do it again on a faster clock. I would not have needed 60 seconds the second time. I would not, perhaps, have needed 30.
The farmhouse in Galena is, as I record this, in the small, steady warmth of an October afternoon. The 2 cats are asleep in the living room window. The small kitchen garden has been put to bed for the winter, except for a few late carrots Adeline and I are going to pull next weekend when she drives down. The framed handwritten note that Adeline gave me in the memorial garden behind St. Mercy Regional Hospital, with my original chosen name for her written above her current legal name, is on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, where I see it every morning when I make coffee, and every evening when I rinse the dishes, and at every other moment of my waking life in this house. The corrected birth certificate, with the small Illinois state seal, is in the top drawer of my own desk in the small back bedroom I use as a study. The paperwork is, by every meaningful standard available to the state in which I have lived my entire life, in order. If you have listened to all of this and any piece of it has felt close to something you have carried in your own life, I want you to hear one thing before I let you go. The arrangements imposed on us by the people who arranged them were not, in the end, about our shame. They were about theirs. The chairwoman in the cardigan was not protecting me from a 16-year-old's mistake. She was protecting herself from the public consequence of her 16-year-old daughter's mistake, on the assumption that the public consequence of my mistake would attach to her in her small, careful adult reputation, and that the only sane management strategy was to make the mistake disappear into a fictional second pregnancy of her own. The arrangement made sense in the calculus my mother had been raised inside, because the arrangement preserved her standing in the town. The arrangement made no sense at all in the calculus of what it would do to the 16-year-old it was being executed on, and to the infant being assigned a fictional set of parents, and to the woman the 16-year-old would slowly turn into across the 32 years of her life that followed. The arrangement did not consider those 3. It considered the chairwoman. It considered the Methodist Women's Society. It considered the reputation. It worked, by its own terms, for 31 years and 4 months. It stopped working the afternoon a consumer DNA service emailed a 32-year-old graphic designer in Madison, Wisconsin, the news that her older sister was, in fact, the woman she had been a daughter of all along, and that there was, in the actual chemistry of the cells in her own mouth, no further version of the arrangement that her dead mother's careful cardigan could possibly defend. If you have been carrying a thing your family arranged around you when you were too young to refuse it, and if you have been carrying it in the small, dark interior way I carried Iris Susanna Whitcomb for 32 years, I want you to hear, before I stop, the thing I would have wanted someone to say to me at 23 or 28 or 36. The arrangement was not yours. The shame was never yours. The reputation the arrangement was built to protect did not belong to you.
And the silence the arrangement required of you was not, in the end, the price of being loved. The silence was the price your family extracted from you in exchange for not naming what they did. The price is too high. It has always been too high. And the moment a younger person in your family walks into your kitchen with a printed page and asks you to please tell her whether the number is true, you are in a position to refuse. Finally, and for the first time, to pay any further installment on that price.
The number will be true. The page will be true. The truth will be patient, the way the truth always is. And it will arrive eventually, even in cases where every person who arranged the original silence is dead. And when it arrives, you are not, in that moment, alone. You are sitting at your kitchen table, across from a person who loved you when she was 4 years old and called you sister, and who is preparing, in the slow, careful way she does everything, to take whatever amount of time the new information is going to require, and to keep loving you afterward, in whatever configuration you and she end up deciding to call by what name. The names do not, in the end, matter very much. The loving does. The loving was always there. It was simply, for 32 years, being called by the wrong word. That was the only thing that was wrong about it. Everything else, the small private hours of her childhood I was allowed to be in, the late nights at her college kitchen table in Madison when she was 23 and crying about a thesis advisor, the trips to my farmhouse in her 20s when she was learning to be an adult, the hours she sat in this same kitchen on the night her engagement ended, and I held her, the morning of our mother's funeral when she held my hand at the graveside without yet knowing what she was holding it about. All of that was already the right thing. It had simply been performed under the wrong title. The DNA report did not give us a new relationship. It only let me, finally, after 32 years, call the relationship by its accurate name in the privacy of my own chest, and let her, finally, after 32 years, choose for herself what name she wanted to use for me in the public-facing language of her own life, and choose, with the small, careful courage I have watched her use every other time I have ever watched her make a decision, the name that turned out, in the end, to be the one we had been using all along. My name is Hazel Whitcomb. I am 48 years old. I am a high school English teacher in Northwestern Illinois. I am the older sister of a graphic designer in Madison, Wisconsin, named Adeline Margaret Whitcomb, who is also, in the language of the state of Illinois, as of a Tuesday in late September of this year, my biological daughter. She has chosen to keep both names. She has chosen to keep both relationships. She comes down to Galena once a month. She calls me Hazel. She introduces me, in public, as her older sister. She sends me, on average, 2 photographs of dogs a week, which she has been doing in some form since she got her first cell phone at 16 and has not stopped. She is, by every measure I have available, the great, quiet love of my entire adult life, and she has been so since the morning a chairwoman of a Methodist Women's Society in a small town in western Illinois carried her out of a hospital room in 1993 and told the corridor outside that the baby had finally fallen asleep. She had not, at that moment, fallen asleep at all. She had been wide awake. She had been, on the testimony of the small wall clock above the door, 22 minutes old. She has been awake every day since, in one way or another, slowly and carefully, and without ever being in a particular hurry. And she is, as I record this account in the small, steady warmth of an October afternoon in a farmhouse on 3 acres outside the small town of Galena, Illinois, scheduled to come down for the weekend the Friday after next. She is bringing the small bag of beans from the roaster in Madison. The garden is going to need pulling. There is no rush about any of it. The truth, having taken 32 years to come home, is in no hurry to leave. I am going to sit with it for as long as I have. So is she.
The kettle is on. The framed paper is on the windowsill. The chairwoman is in the cemetery in Vance with the line of scripture she wrote herself. We are alive, and the kitchen is warm, and the rest of whatever time we have is finally ours.